when we do so voluntarily, then with the intent of becoming more attuned to the subjective reality that we're ultimately constituted of, then it's even more fruitful. And so, of course, again, that's what Brahma did, and he had the internal darshan of Krishna. So the tapa is an austerity. Tapa also means light, which is a way of saying knowledge, luminosity. So tapa means knowledge, it means light, it means austerity. Ultimately, when we look at it in the picture of Brahma that I'm describing, it's bhakti. And bhakti is love, and love is born from the womb, as I often say, of sacrifice. So that said, of course, there can be austerity that's not bhakti. But it's not that bhakti is not an austerity of sorts, if you will, explaining the word, in a broader context, as I am, and Brahma's the example. We in the Gopal mantra, which is revealed in the Gopal Tapani. Tapa again means light, means austerity. So to shed light on Gopal, the mantra comes. We find the word swaha, which is this very spirit of sacrifice. And looking closely at that, as I've commented there on my commentary in Gopal Tapani, while the mantra consists, one can say, primarily of names of Krishna in the dative case, which implies supplication to Govinda, to Krishna, to Gopijana Vallabha. The mantra concludes with the word swaha, which can be construed to represent Radha, who is the very embodiment of love. Krishna is the object of love. She's the embodiment of the love. Love, as I said, is born out of sacrifice. So they're intertwined in a sense. As I said, I think it's one has to sacrifice from austerity. One has to from austerity to sacrifice. They seem to be elements of one another in a sense. I don't know how you could sacrifice and not forego, which if you're foregoing, then you're undergoing some austerity. Of course, the giving is the getting ultimately, but there are different types of sacrifice, and then the corresponding austerity that arises, out of that sacrifice. So as I say, you could, it's an austerity to lay on a bed of nails, but you're not going to get bhakti, from that, or something will come from, and people do that kind of thing. I think that you kind of can't have one without the other, if you will. But I guess you could undergo austerity involuntarily, but I don't think that you can participate in sacrifice without. That implies something voluntary on one's part. One undergoes a sacrifice, whereas one could undergo austerities without desiring to. One would have to. It could be forced upon one by circumstances, by conditions, cold, heat. Cold becomes an austerity to endure it, for example. So, the more you play it out, you can find some difference between the terms. as well. But I would say, again, in conclusion, to repeat myself, as I'm just kind of thinking about it a bit here, sacrifice implies some willingness on one's part. One has to make a sacrifice, engage in sacrifice, willingly sacrifice, whereas one doesn't have to willingly undergo austerity. But it will be an austerity of sorts to willfully undergo the sacrifice that, that, as I say, is also the womb from which love is born. So from self-sacrificing, to use the adage or phrase of poetic phrase of Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj, he looked at self-sacrifice as the dutiful expression of love, if you will, that we find, for example, in Vaikuntha, self-sacrificing because he's God. We give up for him, our own interests. And so to move from self-sacrifice to self-forgetfulness, which we find in Goloka, the devotees are forgetful of the concerns of their self. It's not a calculated form of love. Because he's God, I shall set my own considerations aside. And in that type of dutiful love, there's some distance between the object of love and the lover, or the object of worship and the worshiper. Whereas in love, that distance is bridged, where the object of love and love become, in a dynamic sense, in many respects, one. So again, in that sense, love is born out of the womb of sacrifice. First, you have to understand there's God, and I should give myself to him. And then with a finer focus, we come to the Krishna conception and the proper worship and so forth, leads to the kind of love in which could be referred to as self-forgetfulness, which he mean by which Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj meant without calculation. In other words, I should worship God because he's God. I just love Krishna. Those are related but different. Does that help?
Very much so. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for your question.
Adolf?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. I would like to ask a question about practice.
I cannot hear him. You, Tadas, I cannot hear you.
Oh, wait.
I cannot hear anybody now. I see Archon City.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, we're not hearing you. I wonder, did you?
now can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
I can hear you too now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so since the beginning of practicing japa, chanting japa, Hare Krishna mantra, I'm facing a problem that just after finishing chanting, the mood or the state that I get into while chanting disappears. Like just when I stand up from the floor, that's it, it's gone. And then different tadas is activated, who is full head in material activities and problems and stuff like that. So basically from the beginning, I'm looking for the practice or for some, I don't know, for something what would help me to keep that mood or state through the day, that I wouldn't lose myself, that one which I like more, that one who is, like basically I like myself better when I'm chanting comparing to that one who is, acting in the daily activities. And I was looking like I have read somewhere that uh, in some Christian monks, they do like they listen to their heartbeat, and according to that heartbeat, they are chanting their prayers, and then during the day they listen to their heartbeat, and according to that they remember the prayers, and it helps them to get in that mood. But it seemed too difficult for me, like with Hare Krishna mantra, because it's like 16 words, and it's like, well, it was too difficult. Then I have heard in one lecture somebody told me about Soham mantra. Mm, but then I didn't found any any explanations of that in any Vaishnavas lectures. But now I have a note in my list that in one lecture of yours, I believe it was on Gopal Tapani. I haven't written, but I believe you were speaking about that Soha mantra, and you have mentioned that it should be practiced. You know, when you inhale, you say so, and when you exhale, you say hum. So the question would be if this could be practiced like by everyone, or you have to get some initiation for this mantra, and if it could be practiced by everyone, could you tell more about what meaning is in that, what you should think while you do that, while inhale and exhale, and what your mood should be, what you should think about?
Yeah, that's a meditation that is prescribed in the Gopal Tapani, among others. It is a really kind of on a lower level, in a sense. It serves as a remembrance, contemplation of the fact that in quality, the nature of the Atma is such that it has likeness to Brahman. So it's a kind of a way of saying, I guess, I'm not the body. I'm like Brahman in nature. We would add to that, of course, therefore I have spiritual potential in connection with Bhagavan and so forth. So Ham Gopala. Again, from the Vaishnava perspective, and that's a Vaishnava Upanishad, the spirit of it is a meditation on the likeness between Atma and Brahman, not in a radical or absolute oneness. So it's not something typically that Vaishnavas, that Rupa Goswami has emphasized. And I think that the reason for that being is that the audience for whom he was writing pretty much was acquainted with that idea, more so than, for example, coming to the West probably used to say you're not the body, like, over and over again. In the Eastern tradition, you grow up with that understanding. And then there are schools of thought that are completely absorbed in that alone and err, as we would think, from our understanding, in terms of conceiving of that oneness between Atma and Brahman to be absolute. So that doesn't mean you can't chant it. You could. But I think that the Bhagavatam itself and corollary or subsequent texts from Gaudiya Acharyas offer other ways in which to, in our interaction with the world, the objective world and sense objects, which we inevitably or invariably do interact with after coming up and walking, after sitting. You want to connect, and this is what you're asking, the walking with the sitting. How one sits should have an impact on how one walks, and how one walks should have an impact on how one sits. They should go together. With regard to the walking, the Bhagavatam, it begins in Sukadev's discourse to Parikshit Maharaj with a way of thinking about the world as a manifestation of God. So the Virata Rupa, the sun is the eye, the moon is the other eye, or the clouds are his hair, the flower, the birds are his artistry, and so there's many different descriptions of that. But the purpose of that is just exactly for what you're talking about. I'm now walking, if you will, and interacting with the sense objects, which I have to do to gather food or clothes or whatever it may be. And so how to think of the external world in relation to that which I'm contemplating, the Godhead, in my pursuit to directly go within in japa, in meditation. Of course, that said, this is a very broad idea, and the way to take it to a more something that's more appropriate, if you will, for Vaishnavas themselves who have been initiated into the tradition and so on. They are meditating on the form of the Godhead, Radha Krishna, for example, Narayan, Lakshmi Narayan, for example. And typically, they are connected with the deity in their home or in a local temple or something like that. And so the extension of Archan, worshiping the form, establishing the form of the Lord externally. We meditate on him internally in japa, and through his name. Externally, he's manifest as the Archa Vigraha. And the Archa Vigraha, properly understood, gives us a whole range for just a way in which the whole range of our human activities, or our walking, our interaction with sense objects, can be a cause of remembrance of Bhagwan. So we live in his house, or he lives nearby, and our house is a satellite of his house. We're his devotees. He lives here in this place, and maybe you have a central temple, and you're like Jagannath Puri, or everything's centered around to give an example, everything's centered around the temple. The temple's built, and people moving around there, and so the deity needs flowers. So there's a flower maker, there's a garland maker, and then there are gardeners who grow flowers, and then there are cooks, and then there are milk people, and garment makers, and all the things that you do for your own human self, sense of self, bodily, physical, psychological, so it can all be done for the deity. So you're walking and interacting, and your occupation is also related to this was the idea, how it was set up. So you would have a job. The deity employed all kinds of people, if you will, and they were paid something enough to maintain themselves, and the balance of that was of course offered to the deity. It's a very beautiful idea. So it's an example of how to connect the internal sitting meditation with the walking, because the deity, while the meditation is a closing down of the external senses, the deity worship is very generous in that it employs all of the senses, the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the sense of touch, and everything, which is what we, do in everyday life. So, in this idea, the deity is not just something in a closet that, but he's the center, and the focus shifts. This is the idea behind it. And I'm, in the circumference it's being held together by the center, and I have to give my energy to it. So this was, we see this very prominent, in the founding of the Sampradaya. So Rupa Goswami's big temple, there in Vrindavan, in Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was the main cook, and the whole community developing around these temples, Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Govinda, and so forth. That said, then further development or way of thinking in terms of my everyday movements, aside from sitting, my walking, connecting my thinking at that time, my interactions with the senses, with my meditation. Of course, this is more esoteric, but the Leela of Krishna, as one becomes acquainted with it, then it has 8 divisions, and so that in corresponding times. So devotees will think about the times in the Leela that Krishna is performing certain pastimes, and they'll watch the sun, and now the sun is rising. So this is happening in Krishna Leela. The sun is a powerful meditation. I mentioned it before. In the Virat Rupa, it's like one of the eyes of God. So you can also think of the sun, the Kal Chakra, the time influence, the eye of God, seeing me everywhere. So you keep remembering, where's the sun? Where is the sun? Where is the sun today? Where is the sun today? And that's the eye of God watching me. And then if you further that, of course, what is he doing at this time in his Leela? There's one idea that the sun is a manifestation of the Godhead, or let's say a metaphor for thinking about God, because the sun provides, for us everything. I mean, vegetation comes from the sun, rain comes from the sun, peaceful, enlivened mind comes from the sun. It's worship for good health. So if the sun didn't come up one day, well, it'd be a disaster, obviously. So this might be good for you. You try to think, where's the sun? Where is the sun? And the sun is watching me. Now that's one thing. Sun as God, who's sustaining me, who I'm grateful for, in whose eye all of my movements are by whose eye all of my movements are witnessed. So let me act in such a way that I know that I'm before God. That's the broader idea. Now the deeper idea is and by the way, while God is sustaining me, as the sun does, inside the sun, there are all kinds of nuclear explosions going on. What's that all about? What's the life of the sun, aside from the fact that as a byproduct of its life, it sustains us? What's its world? And this then takes us to the Leela. So you can meditate on the sun in terms of the broader sense. God is taking care of me, providing for me. His eye is watching me. And then further, as I say, inside the sun, he has his own life. And while he appears it's 12 o'clock, and this is happening to me on earth at this time, inside of his own Leela, in the sun, what's going on? Well, he's off to Radhakund at midday and taking some friends with him to rendezvous with the gopis and so forth. So it can serve as a meditation in a broad sense, and in a very internal esoteric sense. So these are some of the kind of ideas that have been suggested through the texts and employed by devotees. But the long and short of it is yena tena prakarana mana Krishna namesha. Somehow or other, Rupa Goswami says, you fix your mind on Krishna. So it's not limited to these ideas. These have been effective, and I brought them out to some extent. But yeah, you can chant Soham and think, I'm not this body by nature. I'm the unit of consciousness, and I would, and I have a prospect as a result of blessing of bhakti to be more than I am without bhakti. And what I am without bhakti is pretty significant. It's much more than all the whole external world and all of the enjoyment that anyone can get, that everyone can get from all of their senses combined. I am inherently more joyful than all of that could afford one. If you could take all of the enjoyment from all of the senses of all of the living beings in the world, enjoying all of the sense objects at the same time and inject it into your system, it wouldn't do anything for you in comparison to just the experience of what you are. What to speak of what you are in connection with bhakti, what prospect you have. That's staggering, so much so that in a word or a phrase, it makes liberation look small. So these are some thoughts. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much. I like very much that with the sun. I will try that.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Seems,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Hare Krishna.
So
Very nice.
Kumaraj, Krishangi has a follow-up question in the chat for about this. Can you see it?
Oh, okay. Chat, huh? Kushangi says, Guru Maharaj, I would have a follow-up question about chanting different mantras. I was listening to an interview with one of your god siblings, and they recommended that in order to bring the restless mind to Krishna while chanting, it would be good to meditate on the Mangal Charan mantras simultaneously while chanting the Maha Mantra. They especially mentioned this mantra, Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagat Pate, Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. I was wondering if you would like to share your thoughts on this. Some devotees do that kind of a thing. That means to say they verbalize the names of Krishna in the Hare Krishna mantra, and that kind of becomes automatic. And meanwhile, they're in their minds, they're doing a kind of what might be called mananam, contemplation. And it could be on the form of Krishna, for example, on the form of the deity, from feet up to head, and remembering how he was dressed today. I remember when I was a young devotee in Los Angeles, and I knew all the outfits that the deities had. They only had so many outfits, and I had seen them, so I knew them all, and I knew which day they would be wearing what. And so I would, all day long, I would meditate on the outfit and the different arrangements and so forth while doing anything and everything. I didn't know if I was doing it right, because if you're told you to think about Krishna, I asked Nanda Kumar, who was Prabhupada's servant at the time, I said, this is what I'm doing. I'm thinking of Krishna all the time. Is this right? And he said, well, it's better than me. So I thought, well, I guess I got that right. But that's how, uninformed we were in a sense. And Prabhupada was kind of like shooting with a shotgun, very kind of broad, approach to capture us, anything in his path, so to speak. But so anyway, that's another example of what that devotee is speaking of. Or it's another common, maybe not so common, but something that is useful in this regard would be the Shikshastakam prayers, which speak also about different stages of bhakti going through. And sometimes devotees will recite those in their mind while externally chanting and contemplate the meaning. After all, the Shikshastakam is all about chanting, different stages of chanting, what accrues from that. So those, any number of prayers, verses describing Krishna's form, qualities, and that could become more focused too. Like, for example, there are like, I think maybe 15 or 16 qualities out of Krishna's 64 that Rupa Goswami singled out for that are special for those in Sakya-rasa. So one can learn, I don't know, it's maybe like 2 verses, they're all mentioned. And it's easy to learn those 2 verses. And then each of the qualities that are mentioned in another part of the text, Rupa Goswami gives examples of those qualities. So this becomes a guna smaranam. So you meditating on the qualities of Krishna while chanting the name. You can meditate on the form of Krishna while chanting the name. You can meditate on the leelas of Krishna while chanting the name. But the way I'm speaking about it and the way this devotee is speaking about it that you refer to, it's kind of a mananam, I would say, kind of a contemplation. And the two are like related. You're chanting the mantra and you're contemplating. I just want to make a distinction between that type of guna smaranam, or meditating on the qualities of Krishna, or lila smaranam, or rupa smaranam, meditating on the lila or the form of Krishna, and the meditation on the qualities, form, lila of Krishna that arise out of the chanting itself, without a separate effort, if you will, on the part of the mind, as the name begins to reveal itself, which of course is a result of becoming absorbed, more absorbed. So this is a method that may help a devotee to become absorbed, or to avoid having the mind think of things unrelated to the chanting, which it's going to do naturally, spontaneously. There will be a stage in asakti where just the reverse happens. Everything you see reminds you of Krishna, rather than distracts you from Krishna. But so in the earlier stages, this kind of mananam, I think it can be useful. And again, the more one becomes absorbed, then the name starts to reveal himself, and then far beyond what you can think of in your mind, remembering what you saw, for example, when you're the darshan of the deity, this is the form of Krishna, or this picture of Krishna, and I'm remembering it. The actual one actually has the kind of an internal, I want to say, darshan of Krishna's form. I remember in Kirtan before Radha Govinda in New York, one evening, how all of his qualities, or particular qualities, were just spontaneously began to manifest in my mind. And he was giving me, from, I was doing Kirtan, of course, in Arti before his form, and out of that, without trying to think of the quality just began to manifest. So that's a little different than what that devotee is talking about, what you're asking about. But what that's a good thing to do. That can be helpful. I mean, you could say, as Prabhupada did sometime when it was asked what to think about while chanting, he said give the mind a rest, just hear the chanting. But that may be hard for some people, active mind, to do. And so an active mind, maybe there are other ways to, like we're talking about, to capture it, to engage it, that are related to the chanting. No harm, could be very helpful. Try it. I would especially recommend to you, Krishangi, that well, for those and those who like the friendly relationship with Krishna, to take those verses that describe his qualities. I should put them on the forum, maybe the Tattva Vivek forum or something, or the Sri Chaitanya Sangha forum, and learn those verses, and then learn the examples of them, the qualities particularly pertain to Sakya. What are those qualities? And what are examples of them? In the book I'm right out, I did a whole section on that. Maybe I'll post some of that on the what's the best forum, the Tattva Vivek forum or the Sri Chaitanya Sangha group? I don't know. Maybe both. And so you can look there. And I would, in terms of what the devotee you had heard in the interview was talking about, this would be a good way to do something like that. He's charming. So if you meditate on his qualities, you think, oh, I'd like to, that's the one I'd like to meet, this guy. So
Can I ask a follow-up question?
you can.
About your experience of seeing the qualities coming to you. Did you see the like words, or was it visions of Krishna doing something that displayed the quality? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's like this is what he's like. Oh, as if you're experiencing him doing that.
Showing the quality, exemplifying it. Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Bhakti Shakti, you have to unmute yourself.
Maharaj, I hope you hear me. We had this morning some Sangha with our Yatra here, and there was a question about how to serve the spiritual master.
She can't hear me. Bhakti Shakti, we can't hear you.
Oh, why like this? Do you hear me now? I will.
Uh-oh.
I can hear her.
You can.
You-
Okay.
I can.
You can. Is it
check
better
and
now?
see, Bhakti Shakti, if you're on the English channel, checked.
Yeah.
Let me answer one question here that Tadas is asking. Where could I
Okay.
find these forums that Maharaj mentioned? They're on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Tattva Vivek, and we have one called Sri Chaitanya Sangha Group, I think. And maybe, do you know Saragrahi? Dasi? There she is. I can see her. Or some of the other devotees. You're in Poland, right, Tadas? Of course, she's
I don't
in.
have Facebook.
Hmm?
I don't have Facebook.
Well, then you can't get on those forums.
Yeah, so I need to get. Okay, I understood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Some of the devotees can help you find it once you get on there.
Mhm.
Let's try one more time. Bhakti Shakti,
Do you hear me now?
we can't hear you.
But then how comes I'm on some other channel? Okay, anyway, we leave it for next time.
She must be on the wrong channel. It's not on the
Yeah.
English channel.
Archana, I have to keep the mute original unchecked in order to hear.
Okay.
But I think the instructions have been to check that.
Yeah, okay, I just unchecked it. Okay,
Do you hear me now?
I do. Okay, I did uncheck it. Yeah, so. But,
Okay.
but let's ask Umaraj if he can hear. Can you hear?
I can hear, I
Okay.
can hear you.
You can't hear her. Okay.
I can't hear
Uh-huh.
Bhakti Shakti.
Do you hear me? No.
No.
Okay.
So Gumar,
Next.
if you need to uncheck or click on unmute the audio again.
Okay, I did again. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I don't think he can. He's still not.
Okay, maybe
Well,
take
maybe
other
someone wants to
questions.
repeat her
So
question.
Yeah, go ahead and say your question, Bhakti Shakti.
Okay, yes. Pranams Guru Maharaj. We had a morning sangha where there was a question about how we can serve the spiritual master, because the question was, do we have direct and indirect service to the spiritual master, and in the daily activities, how we can bring this meditation of serving him
It's a long
directly.
one.
And sorry.
Yeah, she's telling me her question. The question is how to serve the spiritual master. Do we have certain direct and indirect services that we can meditate on in the service of Guru? Is that right, Bhakti Shakti?
Yes, more or less.
More or
let's
less.
see.
Okay. So more or less, that's her question.
Well, I think that in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, in the second chapter, there's a verse. No, I can't remember the verse. The commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's a famous verse, and I know it now. I can't remember. He, in his commentary, he cites his Gurvastakam. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado, yasya prasada nagati kutopi. That by pleasing the spiritual master, one pleases Krishna. And I wish I could remember the verse. Now I can't. If anyone can remember, they can chime in, but we'll write it. Yeah, Vyavasyatmika buddhi. Gita Govinda. Very good. Vyavasyatmika buddhi. Ekeha kuranandana. Bahu shaka hidantascha. Bahu shaka. Mind goes in many directions for some people, but the devotee should have their intelligence fixed upon Krishna. Vyavasyatmika buddhi. Ekeha kurunanda. Eke. So one-minded. Devotee should be one-minded, not many-branched. Bahu saka. Saka means branch. So mind going in many different directions. That won't help. So when Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on what it means to have the mind fixed upon Krishna, he cites the Gurvastakam, that putting the focus on the Guru. But then he speaks about the focus on the Guru in terms of what the Guru teaches about Krishna Bhakti. So hearing, chanting, so on and so forth. These are the angas of bhakti that, besides taking shelter of the Guru, that the Guru teaches us to engage in. And in one sense, engaging in them is serving the Guru who instructs us to do so. So not everybody, that is to say, lives with the Guru, for example, and can render other services, personal services, bringing prasadam, cooking for her, or making a garland for him, such things like that, at least in the personal presence of the Guru. Now, there are extensions of that kind of a thing where you can take the picture and so, I worship the stone from Govardhan, and then I have the pictures of my gurus. I chant all their mantras, pranam mantras for all of them before the puja. There's a puja for that one can do the Guru puja before, with the same to the same extent one does the Krishna puja, and that's often the case. It does puja before the Murti or the picture of the Guru, offering different items and so forth, and then proceeds with the offering to Krishna. That's another way of doing. So there's kind of an extension of being in the personal presence of the Guru in the form of remembering the Guru, meditating on the Guru, and in one's mind or in the form of archan, offering the appropriate items and so forth. So that's something for everyone. Then some gurus may have something they're trying to do in the world, like Prabhupada had, like something he was trying to do as a kind of a mission. Not every guru has a mission with something to accomplish in the world, other than to teach bhakti and exemplify that. But if the guru does, then there may be ways that one can assist in that, to help the financing of it, in any number of ways. For me, I'm mostly absorbed in the publishing. So to help with publishing, for example, you wanted to. I remember you spoke to me about, wrote to me about translating, I think, my Bhagavad Gita into what? Bulgarian. So that's not an easy thing to do. And I don't know the limits of your qualification, but it's an example of service to the Guru beyond the broader sense that everybody can participate. And this is speaking of it in terms of a specific, for a Guru who has something that he wants to accomplish. He would like to see that the knowledge that has been shared with him is shared with others. It doesn't belong to him. So would like to see it shared with others in other languages and so forth. So there are any number of examples like that. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so it's almost 12:30 and we have
Okay.
5 or 6 more questions. I'm wondering if maybe to start next time, I'll put these questions from today on the top of the list for next week, so that way, everyone will have an opportunity. So the devotees that didn't get to ask today, you have to get on again next week, and I'll keep the list. So
Also, if you let me know at the beginning of the talk, we have, a number of questions, I can shorten my answer to some of them.
but they were such really great answers. I don't know that today I wouldn't have wanted you to shorten those answers.
Still, I know there are more. I can still answer substantially, each one in shorter.
Yeah, now that we're combining the 2 calls, I think that's going to be the case. We're going to have more,
Good.
now we have 80 people on the call today. So
Oh, very good. Well, nice to be with all of you. All over the
wonderful.
world.
Thank you so much for being with us and
Hare Krishna.
giving us
Jai.
Jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare.
Hare.